Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today I am ranking the 9 superhero films released in 2017. I'm referring to this as a superhero ranking instead of a comic book film ranking because I ran a Twitter poll. I was unsure on which movies to include, which movies not to include, and ultimately I am including 2 films here that are not directly taken from comic books themselves. So this ranking is for theatrical wide releases only when it comes to superhero films. And obviously, I can only rank the films that I have seen. So I haven't seen some of the DC animation that was released, such as Batman and Harley Quinn, which did get a small, limited release into theaters, but it's not included here. So that leaves us with a total of 9 movies to be ranked. And this is my personal ranking. This is the order in which I personally enjoyed them. So it's not necessarily, technically, the best to worst films on the list. And I'm also going to throw out the caveat, I actually enjoyed all 9 of these films. So although I had to put something down in 9th, 8th, 7th, I enjoyed everything here. I think it was a pretty solid year for superhero films, and it made this ranking actually very tough. But decisions have been made, and rankings have been submitted. So let's go ahead and reveal the list. Power Rangers does come in at the bottom of my list, but if this were a ranking of biggest surprises, Power Rangers probably actually would be number 1, because I enjoyed this way more than I thought I was going to. It worked really well as a coming-of-age story, like a teen comedy for the first 2 acts of the film, and then it turned into a really fun, over-the-top, kind of campy, kind of kitschy Power Rangers film in that 3rd act. It had an effortlessly diverse cast, it introduced a bisexual character. I thought so many things worked so well. All 5 of these kids gave really solid performances, and I loved the ever-so-campy Rita Repulsa from Elizabeth Banks. I know that she's kind of divided people, but I thought it was fantastic and it fit the movie well. However, I think there's a lot more technical issues when it comes to Power Rangers in comparison to a lot of the other films on this list. I think there are some pacing issues and then some big tonal shifts that keep it from really being able to lift out of this 9th spot. But it was fun for what it was, just not quite as good as the other 8. Like Power Rangers, I grew up with Captain Underpants. This was one of my favorite book series growing up through elementary and even part of middle school. I always have had a special place in my heart. So when I saw that they were making a full-length feature film out of Captain Underpants, I was nervously excited. I didn't want them to ruin it. I wasn't sure how the property would translate into film. And they did a really great job bringing this property to film. Out of the 9 films considered for this ranking, I think Captain Underpants is actually the most inventive. It used what it had so well. It only had a $30 million budget. Thus, they brought in so many different mediums to tell their story, and it never felt forced. It never felt out of place. We had sock puppets, we had flip book, hand-drawn animation, we had the regular animation. It just moved in and out of these different storytelling mediums so well, and they were all so fun and so funny. And the movie in general is really fun and really funny. I think a good chunk of these jokes land. They even make potty humor work in this movie, which is a huge accomplishment. Ultimately, what gets Captain Underpants ranked down at number 8 is that I do think that the humor is a bit hit or miss in comparison to maybe some of the other humorous attempts on this list. And at times it does feel aimed at a very young audience, like the books are, so you can't fault it too much for that. And I think, honestly, it just kind of comes down to humor, personal taste. And Captain Underpants, personally, didn't have that kind of humor I love as much as some of the other films further up the list, but it was still a very fun, very inventive, solid film. Yes, I am wearing a Baby Groot shirt, which may have hinted this film would land higher on the list, but alas, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 comes in at number 7. And honestly, out of the 9 films listed here, this is the biggest disappointment of them all, and that may weigh a little bit heavily on how it was ranked for this list, because I had such high expectations. I thought the trailers were really solid. The first movie is so much fun. I was really excited to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and ultimately, I think the movie is kind of a mess. There's just so much going on. There are so many plot lines forced into this one story that most of them never really get the payoff that they deserve. They never really get the development that they deserve. I think that our whole villain plotline is also very convoluted. So it just kind of turned into a case of this film being pulled in so many directions that everything felt thin. In saying that, upon rewatching Guardians of the Galaxy 2, there are so many great, fun, wonderful moments in this film that it was lifted above the other 2 that have so far been mentioned. When it comes to visual effects, I think this is probably the best of the 9 films here. There's a couple of green screeny shots, but overall I think the visuals are dazzling and it looks gorgeous. There are a lot of really funny, fun moments, save for Drax, who, whew, that was a big problem in this movie. And there are some really great heartfelt moments here. Of course, the whole Yondu storyline worked so well. I just wish it would have had more attention given to it. It would have been a through storyline that got the attention it deserved. Same thing with Gamora and her sister. That storyline could have been great, and we got a nice touching moment or 2 in there, but it never fully realized. Plus, Baby Groot was amazing and used to perfection in this film. Some people might think it was overused. I thought it was used just enough. So ultimately, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 felt like a bunch of really awesome, really great moments and scenes just kind of shoved together in an attempt to make a film. But when it's good, it is really good. I enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming. I didn't love it, but I also didn't think it was bad by any means. And pinpointing exactly why I felt underwhelmed is kind of difficult. The main problem I had with Spider-Man Homecoming was I felt that it landed in a very weird middle ground. It kept kind of bouncing back and forth between wanting to be a contained, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man film and then having to be part of the bigger Marvel Cinematic Universe. And honestly, I think it worked better as a contained film, but it kept having to be pulled into MCU, Tony Stark, we have to go big and save the world type of territory, but that grandiose didn't match up with our villain, who was very much like a local threat kind of villain. So it just didn't mesh together. It felt like 2 movies kind of like jigsawed into one film. Also, I have some nitpicks with like Tony Stark's role in this film and him basically taking over the Uncle Ben role and his role with creating the spider suit, but those are all small, minor nitpicks. But the majority of this film really was a very charming movie. I think that Tom Holland is a great Peter Parker and a wonderful Spider-Man. He's so funny. He fits this role perfectly. So I'm excited to see him in the role moving forward, and I just enjoyed Tom Holland in the movie, period. And as this fun, like, high school comedy, it was fantastic. I loved the moments that we got when he was just hanging out with his friends and interacting with his peers. I thought it was so fantastic. Plus, the visuals here are also really good. And I think our villain is one of the stronger villains of the MCU, but we got that wonderful, like, amazing scene in the car, the like red light, green light, on our way to homecoming scene with Michael Keaton and Tom Holland. That was fantastic. So overall, Spider-Man Homecoming just kind of struck me as a solid film across the board. It doesn't do anything really bad, but it didn't quite live up to greatness. So it comes in at number 6. To many many people putting Justice League at number 5 over Spider-Man and Guardians is probably going to be blasphemy. But simply put, I had more fun watching Justice League. Does it have more technical problems than both of those films? And I would say Captain Underpants? Yeah, it does. But I loved these characters. I thought that they were brought to life on the big screen in our first ever Justice League movie so well. Gal Gadot embodies Wonder Woman at this point. I think she is fully on board. We are all fully on board, even the doubters. We love Gal Gadot in this role because she's amazing, and you can tell that she's putting her heart into this character. I thought Ezra Miller as the Flash was fantastic and brought a lot of comedy. I actually think Ezra Miller's comedy worked about 90% of the time. I know others will disagree, but hey, this is my ranking. Jason Momoa, pretty awesome as Aquaman, though a little bit underused. I think that he brings an awesome, new, cool spin to the character. And then Ray Fisher as Cyborg was actually surprisingly really good and brought a great character to life on the big screen. Ben Affleck as Batman was definitely the weakest part of the film. I think he's good overall. It just always feels very one note. His Batman is so stagnant that it's hard to really get behind it. And then Henry Cavill was wonderful as Superman in this film. Plus, the problems that everybody else has with the villain and with an overly simple story, I don't really have a problem with. I don't mind a big baddie in a film. I don't mind a straightforward superhero story. Especially coming off of the previous films, which in my opinion were just convoluted messes within the DCEU. So it was nice to have just a character-centric movie with awesome characters that I enjoyed being around. The big problem, however, is the special effects. I think out of all of these films, Justice League has by far the worst special effects, and I believe it has the largest budget at $300 million. That ending battle looked pretty horrible, and the green screen usage in this movie is actually borderline unforgivable to me. I can't believe that a Hollywood picture of this budget would have green screen issues like that. And of course, Mustache Gate with Henry Cavill also didn't look very good. But even with some bad CGI, I still had so much fun with this movie. I couldn't wait to go see it again, and that's why it lands smack dab in the middle at number 5. Sorry, Ben Affleck, but I think Will Arnett brought the best Batman to screen in 2017. I loved the Lego Batman. I think this movie was hilarious. I think about 95% of the jokes land in this one. Maybe it's because I'm a Batman fan, I'm familiar with his properties, but I thought it all just worked so well. The animation looked wonderful. It definitely was a step up for me over the Lego Ninjago movie that came out later in the year. The action was fun, the self-referential treatment was awesome, and I thought it had a lot of heart, and I thought it worked really, really well. The only thing that really holds the Lego Batman back for me was kind of the treatment of the female characters wasn't the greatest. A few inconsistencies in story that were noticeable, but really I had so much fun with the Lego Batman. I think maybe it just wasn't quite as memorable as our top 3 films, but it definitely was a blast. Now I'm going to admit, I don't think Thor Ragnarok would have been all the way up here at number 3 if I hadn't rewatched it before making this ranking, because I actually think I enjoyed it a lot more on my second viewing. I actually found it a lot funnier on my second viewing. But Taika Waititi and Marvel went full steam ahead to make a Taika Waititi movie that fit into the MCU, and I think they pulled it off very, very well. First of all, it's really funny. Like, the jokes come fast and furious, and I think they land nearly every single time. And they come from so many different characters that it just works. It all just comes together, and it works. A big part of that is that while people want to make Chris Hemsworth into this action star and this dramatic actor, I think Chris Hemsworth shines as a comedic actor. Every time he's given the chance to just go full on comedy, it's amazing, and he's amazing in that. Add into that Tessa Thompson, who was wonderful, Jeff Goldblum, which brought tons of comedy himself, and then Cate Blanchett, who was my favorite Marvel villain of the year, and I thought it worked beautifully well. Of course, I would have loved more screen time with Hela, maybe a little bit more development, but how could you not love seeing a wonderful actress like Cate Blanchett just having fun in this role and chewing up that scenery? I loved it. And I also loved the development with Thor as a character. I think he actually has a pretty large arc in this movie. Certainly larger than any of the arcs his character has seen in the previous films. And I really think it's a pretty large arc for any of our lead characters in these Marvel solo films. What holds it back from being one of the 2 best superhero films of the year is it doesn't hold that emotional heft. I think the criticisms that when they're getting into an emotional mindset and really pushing toward some heavier stuff or some emotional breakthroughs, they throw in a joke and break up that momentum, are fair. That is certainly what does take place here. So in lieu of an emotionally resonant, powerful superhero film, they went with a comedy. And I don't really blame them for that. It just ultimately didn't hit me quite as hard as these top 2. But I still think it is a really solid film. I flip-flopped back and forth on these 2 films so many times. And I think they ultimately are probably both going to end up on my top 10 favorite films of the year list. Don't be surprised if they flip-flop there from what they're ranked here, because I go back and forth so much on which one I actually like more. Purely based on the best made comic book film of the year, Logan wins, period. This movie is fantastic. Not just for a superhero film, not just for a comic book film. It is such a great drama. Hugh Jackman is fantastic. He has never been better, not only as Wolverine, but I don't think he's been better in anything he's ever starred in. He was so good here. Patrick Stewart was amazing, and I'm still hoping Fox is able to pull off that awards bid for supporting actor with Patrick Stewart. But this film is funny. Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman bring the laughs, but it also delivers such emotional heft, such earned emotional moments in this movie, and it really just punches you right in the gut when it goes for those moments. I think the film gets a little bit jumbled when we introduce the kids, and then when Laura starts to really talk is when I think the film gets a little bit more shaky, and then it comes back together for a really strong end. But really, I think Logan is nearly perfect. I loved it so much. I think it is amazing, and honestly, I can't believe I'm actually putting another film above it, because I thought it was so good. But ultimately, I had to put Wonder Woman as the number 1 for superhero films in 2017. No film, superhero or not, captured me like Wonder Woman did this year. I went back to the theater over and over to see this movie, and it hit me emotionally each and every time. And the amazing thing is, I think along the lines of Ares a lot of the time. I have my doubts with humanity. I see a lot of negativity in humanity. But Wonder Woman was able to inspire me and uplift me. This movie had everything I want in a superhero film. As I said with the Justice League, Gal Gadot is amazing in this movie. She embodies this Wonder Woman so well. She pulls off strong, powerful woman with conviction, but also soft, feminine, naive, sincere. And it all just comes together for a well-rounded, complete character. And I think she's on it pretty much from beginning to end. Chris Pratt is amazing in this movie. And I think they pull off top 3 superhero or comic book film romances of all time. It just worked so well. Again, this movie has a lot of comedy. It's very funny, at least for the first 2 acts of the film. And then when the stakes raise, the comedy dies out. But that's understandable, and I like that. All of the scenes on Themyscira are amazing. It's so good. And I just want more time with the Amazons. I think they all were fantastic. We all loved Robin Wright. We all loved Hippolyta. It just worked. The fish out of water elements worked. And then they delivered one of the most amazing scenes, one of my favorite scenes in a comic book film ever. And that is the No Man's Land scene. I have to tell you, I'm a tough cry. Like, I never really cry in films. Logan, this close. This close in that ending. But Wonder Woman, also this close. And it came out of pure excitement, out of pure inspiration. When she emerged in that No Man's Land scene, I literally got choked up. It was so impactful. So I do think it holds a same problem that the Justice League has, is that it becomes like this orange, not great looking CGI fest at the end, but there's still so much heart and so much passion and love in that final act. It cuts right through all of the CGI mess around it to completely distract me personally from the negatives and still just love this movie from start to finish. I saw it so many times in the movie theaters. I've bought so many Funko Pops. I have like pretty much a closet full of Wonder Woman shirts now. Posters. I mean, I am just obsessed with this film. It captured me. It captured my heart more than any other film did this year. So it would feel, honestly, disingenuous if I didn't put it as my top superhero movie of the year. Because this was my superhero at the box office for 2017. So that is my ranking of the 9 wide-release superhero-based films released in 2017. What did you think of my ranking? Do you agree? I know many of you are going to disagree. I want to know what your ranking is, either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!